Almeria, a city on the southeastern coast of Andalusia, Spain, is listed as a top tourist destination in the country. This scenic beach town is home to retirees from all over Europe, as well as internationally, due to its highly desirable Mediterranean climate, a health benefit to many. But while tourists flock to the area for the famous food and rich culture, the city also boasts one of the highest homicide rates in all of Spain. A location seemingly right out of a postcard, Almeria possesses a far more sinister underbelly, as it is a hotspot for drugs and known to be a den of iniquity. It is here, among the Gothic cathedrals and free tapas, that a serial killer would go on to rape and murder at least 10 women between 1988 and 1996. Perhaps hiding behind the veil provided by the area's deeply rooted organized crime, a major issue throughout Spain in the late 80s and early 90s, the serial murderer known as the Ravine killer has failed to be unmasked and is still at large today. Critics of the handling of these series of unsolved cases say that authorities did not take them seriously enough. This was due to the fact that the victims of this unnamed killer were known around town as escorts, women of the night who subject themselves to some of the cruelest of conditions in order to survive. Many of the victims lacked a family presence and were also battling drug addiction issues. Therefore, they had very few advocating for them. And while Spain today has a far more tolerant socio-political stance on the business of sex, critics point out that the city's continued culture of violence against women is pervasive, as evidenced by the fact that, even in recent decades, Almeria has possessed the third highest rate of gender-related crime in all of Spain. At the time of the brutal killings, the murders did not cause a media frenzy nor social outrage, resulting in a lack of a proportional police response. This is unlike the much more well-known Spanish case of the death of the Alcázar girls, 3 young women kidnapped and tortured in 1992. The death of those 3 women received far more attention nationally due to the girls being of a higher social status, while the death of at least 9 escorts would be underreported and underinvestigated. The first known act of this killer, who would go on to reign their terror for almost a decade, began on October 23, 1988, when a used auto parts dealer was searching for scrap metal from a ditch located on A334 road near the town of Punchena, about 30 miles or 50 kilometers north of Almeria City. Noticing a putrid smell, he followed the scent and saw that a pair of human feet were sticking out of a sewage drain pipe. The body was visibly female, clothed in a red t-shirt which had a drawing of snowy mountains inscribed with the words "Skydiving Sensation" written in English below the landscape. The victim had on no bottoms but wore red shoes. A later autopsy showed that she had been bludgeoned to death, and crime scene photos display the extensive injuries she received on both her head and neck. The medical examiner noted that her parietal bone was smashed. The parietal bones are a flat cranial bone that covers the mid-skull, helping to form the shape of the head and shielding the brain from outside trauma. In this case, the bludgeoning she received was enough to crush even the most protective of bones. The forensic team also found out that the victim had suffered a broken right fibula about 2 years prior to her death. According to the autopsy, she had died in June or July of 1988. She stood just under 5'3", 160 centimeters, and weighed around 145 pounds, or 65 kilograms. The victim's hair was strawberry blonde, and forensic experts estimated her age to be around 30 years old at the time of her death. Based on the ruggedness of the victim's skin and hands, investigators surmised that the woman may have grown up in a rural environment, such as on a farm, and that she may have done a lot of physical work during her life. Internet sleuths later pointed out that she may have worked in Almeria's greenhouse industry in the production of fruits and vegetables, as the area's climate allows for such bountiful harvests that Almeria is a major source of off-season tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and melons for people all over Europe. This area is known as El Mar de Plástico, the Sea of Plastic, because of the many greenhouses which pepper the area's seaside landscape. The extent of police presence and effort in identifying the woman has been criticized, and to date, no one has come forward to identify her. Investigators discovered that the victim had been killed elsewhere and later dropped into the sewage culvert. Detectives surmised that the woman was possibly tossed out of a car post-mortem by her killer or killers. Initially, law enforcement agents believed that the woman may have been in a situation where unsettled debt resulted in a revenge-based killing. However, taking into account later violent events in the area, that theory would be set aside for reasons with a far more dangerous implication. A serial killer was on the rise. The nightmare would continue on August 6, 1989, in the rural town of Vélez Rubio, located just over 50 miles, 85 kilometers, northeast of Almeria. A local shepherd was walking his flock of sheep in the pastoral fields during the early morning hours. After crossing the road near a construction site at kilometer marker 114, he stumbled upon the dead body of a woman in a ditch. The victim was naked, and investigators later commented that her body was already visibly decaying due to the high temperatures of the area. Police observed a large bruise on her neck and initially theorized that the woman had overdosed and had later been dropped off at the crime scene by her substance supplier to avoid incriminating themselves. A subsequent forensic exam pointed at a death not by overdose, but by strangulation. Just like in the case of the unidentified woman found in June or July, this victim had died somewhere else and had been transported to the crime scene. The victim was later identified as 24-year-old Maria del Carmen Herida Alameda, a known sex worker who operated in the El Zapillo neighborhood of Almeria. She was last seen alive by fellow escorts at around 4 a.m. on August 5th, in the same neighborhood she was known to work. Very few pieces of evidence were found at the crime scene, nor were there helpful artifacts on her body. Therefore, the case would grow cold. Perhaps the killer was satiated by the summer deaths enough that they were content to lay low, or perhaps they continued their murderous spree elsewhere. But it was not until 1 year later, on August 28, 1989, that the third victim would be found. A French couple hiking on their honeymoon was enjoying photographing the landscape of La Baiana Ravine, located 1.2 miles or 2 kilometers west of Almeria City. What started as a sunny and scenic trek quickly turned dark when they noticed something strange located at the bottom of a nearby cliff. Upon further investigation, the body was found to be that of a female, presenting with countless broken bones. The police were called to retrieve the woman as ambulances were unable to operate in such terrain. The unclothed body was in a place so hard to reach that an S-92 search and rescue helicopter was needed to retrieve her. The victim was later identified as 20-year-old Carmen Dolores Sandamay Ramon, the daughter of a local German drug kingpin. She was known to work as an escort as well. Just like the previous victim, Maria, Carmen Dolores was known to frequent the neighborhood of El Zapillo in search of potential clients. A post-mortem examination revealed that she had been raped, and as in the previous case, she too had been strangled to death. Detectives postulated that the killer or killers had taken the young woman there after her death in order to throw her body off the cliff. Rumors began to circulate regarding a killer who was targeting sex workers. Many streetwalkers halted their practices of working outside, and many others left Almeria altogether. Those who continued their work on the street made sure to take precautionary measures. Such safeguards included practices such as noting the John's physical description, the make or model of his car, and the license plates. Escorts also began to heavily advocate for a more robust local police response to the wave of violence against women in the area. And perhaps such stringent safeguards worked, as the killer would not resurface for over 2 years. On October 6, 1991, two workers found the heavily decayed body of a woman near a large greenhouse plant in Punta Initas, a town 18 miles or 30 kilometers west of Almeria. The victim was estimated to be between 25 and 30 years old and was 5 foot 3 inches tall, 160 centimeters. Found wearing only a red bra, the woman had died due to blunt force trauma to her head. Originally, it was thought that the victim was English nurse Alexandra Lily Lai, who had gone missing while vacationing in Almeria around a month prior on August 30th. However, Lai's dental records failed to match that of the woman. Alexandra Lily Lai's body was later found buried in a shallow grave in the sand dunes of southern Spain in late 1991, a case police say is not connected to the serial murders. While police investigation indicated the unnamed victim was a local sex worker in Almeria, her true identity has never been unearthed. The next victim would be uncovered near what is now the luxurious neighborhood of Almeria, known to some as Ensenada San Miguel. This area is situated about 25 miles or 40 kilometers west of the city of Almeria. And while Almeria is now a modern beach resort, in the early 90s it was merely a maze of construction sites. Workers on such a site would have their labors halted on March 7, 1992, upon the accidental discovery of a nude female body, face down upon the rocks. Later identified as Maria Jesus Munoz Borrego, 28, the victim, like the woman before her, was a known sex worker from the area of El Zapillo. And, like the previous victims of what was now clearly a serial killer at large, Maria Jesus had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death. Forensic autopsy revealed that she was later disposed of by being tossed off of a cliff post-mortem. Unlike the other victims, the killer or killers had this time removed 2 souls from existence, as Maria Jesus was found to be 5 months pregnant. The mother-to-be's face showed signs of having been beaten. Her body, deceased prior to the disposal from a high height, fell roughly 130 feet, or 40 meters, before landing in the perimeter of the construction zone. Law enforcement officially began to refer to the unknown murderer as the Ravine killer, as the bodies of victims often appeared in or around ravines or in other low-lying areas. On January 25, 1993, a German tourist was jogging on Agua Dulce Beach, in an area about 6 miles or 10 kilometers west of Almeria City. As the runner was utilizing a shortcut, she tripped over what she first thought was tall reeds, but upon looking back, she realized she had stumbled over the body of a young woman. The body was subsequently identified as Maria Leal Martinez. She was a 22-year-old mother who was married and trying to support her 4-year-old toddler by working as an escort in Almeria City. Maria, like the others, was found stripped of all her clothing, and after being sexually assaulted, she had been strangled to death. A woman who also worked on the street told police that she had last seen Maria alive the night before she was found on January 24th. The witness recalls seeing Maria entering a vehicle described as a type of recreational sports car, which may have been colored dark blue. The witness, whose name was withheld for privacy reasons, recalled that the car had a rear spoiler, which was slightly dented. The car was eventually located and the owner questioned. However, detectives failed to find any evidence which incriminated him. By this point, both the police and the public were acutely aware of the brutal pattern which was emerging. Local police requested reinforcements from Madrid in hopes that the capital city would provide resources to combat the plague of a faceless killer. Just across the border, police in Portugal were dealing with their own serial killer in their capital city of Lisbon. Dubbed the Lisbon Ripper, this killer too was targeting women in the sex industry. Unlike in the Spanish case, this serial killer had the added calling card of eviscerating his victims. The FBI, already assisting in Portugal, were asked to consult across the border, and alongside local resources, they were able to create a psychological profile of the killer. FBI profilers surmised that the killer was a white male between the ages of 28 to 35, although the report noted the killer could be as old as 45. They theorized that the murderer was most likely married or in a long-term relationship, and that he would possess the somewhat horrifying characteristic of leading an otherwise seemingly normal life. The profile went on to detail that the male was likely of great strength, and most likely was known to possess an unpredictable and explosive temper. The FBI went on to say that the man responsible for these deaths likely was intimately knowledgeable about local roads and terrain, and theorized that they may work in the transportation industry, possibly as a truck driver or a cab driver, allowing for less detectable travel amongst the provinces of Almeria. Using this information, the FBI was able to cross-reference such traits from databases in cases in Belgium and the Netherlands. On July 5, 1993, just 6 months after the last woman was found, the 7th victim would surface. Some say that other victims may have been recovered during this time span, but were never officially connected. Media reports indicate that there was a burned Jane Doe found in between the span of times that some theorize may have been another victim, but due to the difference in MO, she was excluded. The 7th victim was found by a local farmer who noticed the battered woman laying across one of the pathways among the many greenhouses at El Hido. The victim was a 25-year-old Moroccan woman named Khadija Monsar, known to her friends as Caddy. Autopsy revealed that Caddy had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death. Her body showed artifacts of having been tied up, as her extremities donned the telltale ligature marks. The killer or killers had placed a strip of duct tape on her mouth before she died. Investigators surmised that it was in order to muffle her screams to anyone that may have been nearby to witness them and potentially alter her fate. Notably, this 7th victim was found wearing only a red bra. Her shirt, pants, and underwear were later located buried underneath the wall of a nearby greenhouse. Detectives realized there was a trend in the clothing of some of the victims. Many of them were found wearing singularly red items, namely in their underwear and shoes. Police wondered if the color red might play into the killer's motives, or if possibly the items were planted. Regardless of their origins, a pattern was emerging. On August 2, 1994, just over 1 year after the 7th victim was found, a resident of the neighborhood of Los Angeles in Almeria was taking their usual morning walk and discovered the lifeless and naked body of a young woman near a local soccer field. The 8th victim was identified as 22-year-old Nadia Hak Amar. Like the last victim, she was Moroccan, and like all the victims, she was a sex worker who is known to work the area of El Zapillo. The medical examiner wrote in his report that the victim had been raped and had later been strangled to death, a shared feature amongst the victims. Unlike the other victims, however, Nadia's autopsy showed that the person who had taken her life had made a vertical gash deep on both sides of her buttocks, although it is unclear in media reports if such wounds were inflicted pre- or post-mortem. Nadia's body showed numerous indications of a violent struggle, and forensic examiners hypothesized the killer may have attempted to leave misleading artifacts of the crime in an effort to distance himself from the now commonly known MO, instead tricking police into believing the victim was not that of a serial killer, but that of a robbery gone wrong. There was no blood found on her body, nor in the surrounding area, an indication that the crime occurred elsewhere and the body was moved post-mortem. Roughly 65 feet away, 20 meters, scattered among the brush, were the deceased's clothes. Another connection that was made between the victims was their close and intimate relationship with notorious drug cartel members. While police were well aware of the homicidal predilections of such gangs, the possibility that Nadia may have been murdered due to her involvement in organized crime was brought up. However, police later changed their position and made the statement that Nadia, too, was a victim of the Ravine killer, although they did not specify how they came up with that conclusion. In all criminal cases involving homicide, police must balance the burden of free press with the confidentiality needed in an active and unsolved case. This results in a precarious desire to both reassure the public of progress while also withholding enough details such that false confessions are more easily ruled out. A more clear pattern of victimology will be released after the successful capture of a suspect and during the trial of the killer or killers. So, while police may have had a myriad of details in regards to why they deviated from their organized crime theory and instead officially named Nadia as victim number 8, so far media reports have not provided further details, such as the color of her clothing. The ninth victim that authorities knew of was found on April 6, 1996. Two fishermen uncovered the dead body of a woman at the bottom of a cliff near Agua Dulce Beach. The body was that of 24-year-old Aurora Amador Carmona, a worker of the streets of El Zapillo, like the others. And, like the others, she was unclothed and had been strangled to death after being sexually assaulted. A later autopsy would reveal that the victim had suffered a broken jaw as well as broken cervical vertebrae. The report indicated that she was thrown down the cliff post-mortem. The medical examiner noted that her major and fatal injuries were not caused by the fall, but inflicted by a brutal beating. Police canvassed the area and learned that fellow streetwalkers had seen Aurora the previous night as she was getting into the car of a client. Witnesses recall that the car was a 3-door Opel Corsa, most likely gray or silver in color. As the unofficial co-workers of Aurora were panicked at the news of her death, police noted that they had the astuteness to still be able to remember a portion of the sedan's license plate, remembering that the last 3 digits were 5AB. With this information in hand, detectives were able to locate the vehicle in question, and with the vehicle, the owner's information as well. Initially, police were certain that this was the clue which would crack the case. However, it only brought upon more ambiguity. The car belonged to a prison guard from Granada, a city some 60 miles or 100 kilometers northwest of Almeria. Working off of the only strong lead that they had, investigators interviewed numerous co-workers and family members of the guard. Upon ordering a background check on him, a sexual assault arrest was uncovered. That prior history, combined with the fact that police were able to place the man in Almeria at the time of 5 of the 9 murders, led investigators to believe they had found their man. Coworkers and managers of the prison recalled him being highly excitable, generally agitated, and some said he was quite violent. He had been formally admonished many times prior because of his violent outbursts, and according to his coworkers, in one instance, he threatened to hurt another guard, a woman, with a hatchet over a small verbal argument. The guard was single and lived with his mother. The hunt for the smoking gun was on. With this info, investigators requested permission to wiretap the guard's phone, which they thought would give them the definitive piece of evidence in which to prove that the prison guard from Granada was the Ravine killer. However, their search warrant was denied, and the funds for the case were relegated to another, more politically beneficial case. Although the caseworkers never managed to get the prison guard arrested, these investigators contacted several prominent police agencies across Europe and North America. And in 2006, in a last-ditch effort to keep the case alive, they sent the official investigatory documents to those agencies in the hopes of them finding a new angle which could lead to the capture of the killer. While Aurora Amador was the last official victim of the Ravine killer, many of those involved in the investigation believe that it is quite possible there were more victims. A woman was found naked and bludgeoned to death near the same place where Nadia Hatch was found in 1998. The woman could not be identified, however, and it has never been clear if she was a sex worker. Police have not entirely disregarded the possibility of her being another victim, although they have not linked them officially. This still unnamed killer was particular in his victim selection. The women whose lives he cut short shared a pattern. Except for the 1988 unidentified female, all of them were short-statured, with long, wavy, or curly brunette hair and dark olive skin. All of them were in their early 20s, and 8 of the 10 women were confirmed escorts. Many of them hailed from households of dysfunction, and therefore had their own dysregulations, which often goes hand in hand with addiction issues. Based on the scant amount of witness reports provided, the killer's MO was well defined. He picked them up, drove them to solitary places in the night, and once in a place of isolation, the killer or killers would sexually assault the woman, after which would come death by manual strangulation. Medical reports do not specify if the victims were disrobed completely before or after death. However, most of the bodies were found completely bare, except in the case that the victim may have been wearing something red, as detectives noticed that in those cases, the unknown individual or individuals would leave the item on the woman before sending her off the cliff. While the prison guard from Granada was later fired from his position in late 1997, this was not due to the suspicions regarding his guilt, but a result of several write-ups regarding his repeated violent behavior. The Ravine killer case was officially deemed a cold case in 2016, 20 years after the death of the last confirmed victim. Due to the lack of victim advocates, the time and resources invested into this cold case show little promise of closure, and the killer is still at large today.